everyone, my name is Eric. Today I'm going to be giving my speech on the story of the Oakland Athletics, their 2002 season. This was an incredible season for the Athletics, as shown in the movie and the book Moneyball. Moneyball is about their general manager, Billy Beane, and he's trying to compete with much richer teams that had a much higher budget. At this time, the Athletics weren't a good team and had an extremely low budget. Beane started looking for some different stats than other teams and hired some undervalued players. What I mean by this is instead of looking at certain stats on players like RBIs and batting average, he used stats called slugging percentage and on-base percentage. Now, most of you don't play baseball and you're probably kind of confused with all the stats and everything. Well, an RBI is when a runner scores off of a batter's hit. So then the batter would get an RBI, a run batted in. Batting average measures the player's ability to hit. For example, if a batter's up 10 times, he gets a hit and gets on base 4 of those times, then he would have an average of .400. This is what most scouts look for when recruiting players. Beane, however, paid more attention to on-base percentage, which looks at how many times a batter gets up versus how many times he gets on base. This would include getting walked. He found some players, by looking at this, that were drawing a lot more walks than other players. Therefore, they had a higher on-base percentage, but not the best batting average. These players, for whatever reason, they were getting walked just a lot. Nobody really knows why, but it just happened to some certain players. But because of their low batting average, other Major League scouts, they were overlooking these players because they only wanted to see the guys that could hit. They only wanted the batting average. Beane also looked at slugging percentage, which measures the player's power. He found that these stats were more effective than the stats that were valued by other Major League scouts. By using these, he could get more effective players at a lower cost. This was his entire goal, to find a way to use his low budget to compete with much richer teams. One example of this is taken from the movie Moneyball. They're looking all around for new players to replace these ones that they've just lost. Now, Billy's scouts are dismissive of a player named Scott Hatteberg because he gets walked a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, some players got walked a lot. Nobody wanted to get him on the team. Beane replies, he gets on base a lot. Do I care if it's a hit or a walk? And this is exactly like what he's all looking for. He didn't care how they got on base. He just needed players to get on base because they needed to move around and get in runs in order to make it far in the season. To put all of this in perspective for you, all this budget stuff in perspective, the Oakland Athletics at the time had a budget of about $41 million. I know that seems like a lot, but it really isn't. It was actually the third lowest payroll of all of the teams at the time. The New York Yankees, on the other hand, had a budget of $125 million. This is the competition he was up against when they were hiring players. Beane was revolutionizing the way that scouts looked at players and the way the game was played. His approach to recruiting new players didn't just stop at the recruiting, it continued into the actual game. He played smart. One example is he stopped stealing bases. A quote from the movie says, "I pay you to get on first, not to get thrown out in second." This is exactly what made the Athletics a great team during that season. He looked at the game logically and realistically instead of just simply and traditionally, like most teams. Now, of course, everything he's doing is just a big task. He didn't do it alone. Instead, he hired Paul DePodesta as his assistant general manager. Paul was the guy doing all of the mathematics known as sabermetrics to figure out everything they needed to know. Sabermetrics is defined as the computerized measurement of baseball statistics. It's baseball math. I just read an article online, actually, called "Using Sabermetrics to Prove the Oakland Athletics Will Win the World Series." What it did is it looked at different stats compared different players all their different stats on the team to see, put them up against other teams and see how they would stand a great chance of actually winning it this year. This is the kind of thing Paul would do. He looked at many stats in order to figure out how to build the best team possible with the Athletics' tiny budget. Now here's an example of what I'm talking about. Paul, or Peter as his name was in the movie, he came to Billy Beane, manager, and he says, "Billy, this man here is Chad Bradford. He's a relief pitcher." Now, most scouts in the major league, they overlook him because when he pitches, he throws funny and he looks weird. Nobody cares about him because he looks funny. This guy could not only just be the best pitcher in our lineup, he could also be one of the most effective relief pitchers in all of baseball. Now, this is the guy that should cost $3 million a year. We can get him for $237,000. Using this new method, the Athletics had an amazing season, even though they didn't win the World Series. Just a fun fact, the Angels won the World Series that year, but Oakland finished the regular season 4 games ahead of them. The Athletics were 103 and 59 that season, meaning they won 103 games and only lost 59. This put them first in their division, like I said, 4 games ahead of the Angels, but they lost in the playoffs to the Minnesota Twins. After the season, Beane was approached by the Boston Red Sox. They loved his new style of coaching and managing the team. They wanted him to be their new general manager. Beane turned down their offer of $12.5 million, 5-year contract, which, if he had taken it, would have made him the highest paid general manager in all of baseball. He did this for a few reasons. One, he didn't want to be 3 time zones away from his daughter, and so far away from his family. The money wasn't the important part, as he said at the end. The money wasn't the important part, it was knowing that he was worth it. Thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed.
Today's topic master is Jonathan.
Okay, our 3 topics today are all on animals, and the first one is what is your favorite animal and why? The second one is kind of interesting. If you had to cross an 100-mile stretch of desert, but you wouldn't do it on foot, and you had to get there in a limited amount of time, which animal would you choose to get there? Like, why would it be quick or something? And then finally, the third one is, if you had to mutate 2 or more species to create some sort of super animal, why would you do it, and what would it be for, and how could it benefit the economy or something? So those are the 3 topics.